Hello everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. In this series, we're aiming to help business owners, business leaders and fellow coaches by sharing our experience and the experience of our guests who've coached people all around the world in all of different sectors and industries that you can imagine. So very little more to say other than do please now sit back, relax and enjoy this edition, and look out for a special offer for our loyal audience at the end of the programme. Hello everybody, welcome to this edition of the Coaching Conversation. Today I'm joined by Allister Frost, and he's going to tell us why he thinks a growth mindset isn't really good enough. What you need is a future ready mindset. Allister, welcome to the Coaching Conversation. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience and explain to them why you now find yourself a coach and an author and a consultant?
Well, thank you, Graham. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. I'm a classically trained marketing and advertising guy by background, 20 years in the corporate world, including a decade pioneering some sort of digital marketing stuff with Microsoft. And after that, I started my own business. And I was providing marketing training, and I was part of that. I got invited to speak at some big conferences and events and got spotted by some top speaker bureaus. And now that's where I find myself as a keynote speaker, busily helping professionals to realize, well, two things really. One, how they could very soon be obsolete in the workforce. And secondly, inspiring them not to become obsolete by thriving with a future-ready mindset.
So what would a typical client look like for you?
Well, typically I'm brought in to speak to medium to large companies, I'd say, in almost any industry sector, really. It tends to be companies that have got a fairly diverse talent pool, some old people, some young people, and a real mixture. But the common thing is that change is sticky and slow, and it just is not working quite as well as it should. So, I end up coming in and helping out with anything from a small group workshop, a couple of, might be half a dozen C-suite leaders, or it could be a multi-city conference tour where I travel around the world with the clients, speaking at all of their different events. And it's very varied. I've spoken with everyone from Cisco to Hyundai to 3M, Vodafone, the BBC, UK Sport, the list goes on.
You talked about change being sticky. And if we go back to the original title of the conversation, a future ready mindset, what's the linkage between the two?
Well, I say change is sticky. Change is slow. Something like 70% of change initiatives in a complex organizations fail to achieve their stated goals in some way. We all know what goes wrong. They're too slow. They're expensive. They're frankly underwhelming in the results that they deliver at the end. And yet we're living in a world where there's more and more change needed because technology in part, but also society, also the politics of the world, everything is speeding up. And the number one reason why change doesn't always work is because staff don't buy into that change. It's down to people, it's culture that gets in the way of strategy. And that's often not because they don't like change. As humans, we're really good at change. We'll jump on the next new piece of technology or whatever it is quite happily as a general rule. But when we're in a workplace, the reason we don't race towards change is because we fear the potential losses that can bring. And that could be a sense of loss of control, of status, of credibility. Even we worry about losing our friendships. If things are different, then what we know today might not be what we know tomorrow. And so that's the problem. That's why I say change is sticky. And the truth is that most change is, I think we'll all agree with this, most change won't hurt us. We've all been through a lot of change in our lives. And whilst it's difficult, we kind of come out the other side and we brush ourselves off and off we go again. But it's our comfort zone, that fear of loss that can really destroy careers now, because the longer you try to hold on to what you once had, the greater the risk is that you don't keep up with what you now need to be doing.
Yeah. And how do you find you can explain that to people. I can understand that you can describe the problem to people, but how do you take them to the next step? How do you help them actually change that mindset?
Well, I think it helps sometimes just to take people away from the white heat of the average working day and help them to realize that we haven't ever had to deal with so much change and uncertainty. And therefore, we do need to develop some new skills if we are to thrive in this. And that's where the future ready mindset comes in. I mean, that's a phrase that I put together a little while ago. And as you know, in the title of your podcast here, growth mindset is not enough. And I think it's quite helpful sometimes to explain to people where we've come from. You know, I'm in my mid-50s now. And when I went through education, school, fixed mindset was the dominant way of thinking. You know, we thought that people had core qualities and a level of intelligence and talent, and those things were innate. They were DNA. They were built into us for some reason, and they were largely unchangeable. So you kind of brought up in this world of, you know, you can go so far, but, you know, don't get beyond yourself, know your limits, stick to what you're good at. And it's incredibly, it's under 20 years since the phrase growth mindset came into our lives. And it was Carol Dweck who first wrote about it in her book. And that was this recognition that our abilities, our intelligence, and our talents can be developed through dedication, perseverance, hard work. But the truth is, you know, you can say that growth mindset to people for as long as you like, but the reality is most people are struggling to keep up or to keep growing because, you know, I've already mentioned it, the pull of the familiar, the pull of the easy life, the comfort zone. We get used to doing things a certain way, just as every generation before has. The difference now is that we're living through a time where your comfort zone won't keep you where you are forever because the world is moving up. Everything outside of your comfort zone, I suppose, is kind of moving on. So a future ready mindset, I think of it as a growth mindset plus. It's like it's knowing that you can grow and develop, but it's the process that I give people. It gives you the fuel to want to grow and the process to do it. A really simple process that people can follow, you know, all through their careers.
When you look at the workforce today and the workplace today, obviously having a curious mind, being open to change, being prepared to push yourself is a very important collection of attributes. But that's not normal in every individual in a collective kind of way. How does your work change that? How do you get into the culture of the organization? And you mentioned that you're in medium-sized to large organizations where the numbers of people and probably the geographic locations are enormous. How
Mm.
do you get into them and help them change that culture, that frame of mind at the individual and the collective level?
Yeah. So the thing that I've found really helpful with this conversation, and a lot of the times when I'm introduced to an organization, I'll be booked to come in and do a keynote talk at a big, you know, the annual conference or something like that. So I'll do a turn and I'll talk about, you know, I'll get people thinking differently. And then oftentimes I'll get invited back. We'll do some coaching and workshops and things like that. But what I've found really helpful is I developed this model, super simple model. I call it the Ready Already growth cycle. And it's basically 5 steps that you can go through that will take you towards something that's new and interesting for your future, help you to learn about it, but then to proactively use those things that you mentioned, your creativity, your imagination to think big, and importantly, your communication skills to bring other people on board with the excitement of the journey that you find yourself on as you explore the future. So I call it, you know, it's kind of your passport to the bright future you deserve is the way that I describe it to people. But fundamentally, what I give people is a 5-step solution that they can go away and try right away. And if it works, they can, you know, I hear about it. If it doesn't work, they can try something else. But for heaven's sake, have a go. And for the vast majority of people, they see great success in just starting to think about their future, because the reality is most people are at best, they're today ready, as I describe it. You know, they're getting through the day. They're frankly surviving, and they're going back to work the next day and they're just trying to keep up with something new, something new. The future ready mindset allows you to stop, create some space in your day to think about what might be next and to proactively go and explore the one thing out of all of the things on your list that you believe to be most important. And it's a really simple process. The minute you do that, you can kind of feel what it's like to be caring about your future as well as today. And that's a massive change for a lot of people.
The 5 steps, do they apply to individuals? Do they apply to a group? How do you position it?
I got the 5 steps here for for the benefit of anyone watching on video, you can see this thing, but I'll give you a website later on and you can go and have a look at this thing if you like. The 5 steps, they apply to individuals as well as a collective. I think they're most powerful when we get a common language whether it's a small team or a division or an entire company, it doesn't matter, but we get a collective language and we understand that things like at the center of my model, I said there's 5 steps, there's one in the middle that's called personal mission. That when we say, what is your personal mission? That's a language we can embrace and adopt. And many of my clients have done that, so that you can have a conversation in the lift or over lunch or whatever with a colleague and say, what's your personal mission? What's driving you at the moment towards the future? And I think that's the most useful thing. But fundamentally, it is absolutely central to my thesis about change, is that people only change when they want to change. So this is primarily an individualistic activity of thinking about what's important to me. What do I care about? What is my personal mission? And then going through the process for yourself because you believe there's something interesting that might make you better at your job in the future. And then having the courage to have a few bad ideas, frankly, but to share those ideas with a few colleagues to help you make them better. That's where you see the culture and the collective coming in, is when lots of individuals step up and say, right, I want to share my thing now. Have a listen to this.
Can you talk us through the 5 steps?
Yeah, very happily. In a nutshell, it's this. So follow is the first step. Well, there's the personal mission in the middle. That's the powerful, motivating reason why you do the job that you do. And I often, in my talks, I talk about when I arrived at Microsoft, they put me in charge of email, Outlook and Exchange Server. And I really wanted to work on Xbox or something cool and interesting. They gave me email. I thought, whoa, this is a disaster. But my personal mission became, when I looked at it, I thought, wow, this is really cool. Obviously, I've got to increase the sales of this, these products. And I tell this story in the book that I've just brought out already. But actually, you know what? I realized that my personal mission is I make the world better at email. And I was driven by this desire to make more people great at email. And so that was my personal mission. And then the 5 steps are these: follow, react, open, surprise, and tell. They're dead easy to remember if you know my surname, Frost. Follow, react, open, surprise, and tell. Follow is you make a list of anything that you think you might need to be better at in the near future. Literally anything. It has to relate to your work, of course, but just jot down everything. A lot of people would write down AI right now because we hear about it. We're not very good at it. Probably need to get a handle on that. That's the sort of thing we're after. It doesn't have to be tech though. It could just be a new piece of legislation, whatever. Doesn't matter. And you pick one thing. Follow is pick the thing to follow, one thing. And it's all about that focus. React then is about learn all you can about that thing and then choose your reaction to it. Is it still relevant to your future or not? This is a check step because a lot of people get caught up with shiny object syndrome, rush around, put all their eggs in one basket, and then they realize, oh, we're doing the metaverse. We should have been doing augmented reality or something completely different. So it's a check step, which catches so many bad choices and removes them. So if you don't like your thing, you go back to follow, pick the next thing. And then there's these 3 superpowers: open, surprise, and tell, the OST of Frost. And these are things that AI cannot do as well as you and never will do. And so they're fundamentally human skills. Open is looking at the world with naive curiosity, almost like a childlike curiosity, looking at what you do and asking why. Why do we do these things the way we do them? Because the minute you do that, you'll start seeing that that things don't have to be the way they are. You open your mind to the possibility it could be different. And I often use a line about something I said at Microsoft. I asked the team, I said, why is the Monday meeting always on a Monday? And everyone looked at me like I'd gone crazy. It's like the answer's in the question, it's the Monday meeting. But why? Why is it on them? And it turned out it was because the boss before the boss before the boss had decided it was on a Monday, and we've been doing it ever since. And it's like, no one had ever stopped to question why it's on a Monday. It's a silly example, but when you ask why of everything about your business that relates to the thing that you're focusing on, suddenly you realize not a lot of it makes any sense anyway. Yeah. So you might as well rip it up and change it. So it's opening your mind. That's why it's called open. Then surprise is about creativity. It's about saying, what if, based on the open space I now have in my mind, what if we did this? What if we tried that? What if we put the data from there to there and we connected it up? Whatever. Having mad, crazy, big, bold ideas. And the reason you need those big ideas is because if you don't think big to start with, you absolutely won't end up with a big idea at the end of it. But then the final step, the T in Frost, is tell. And this is where you have the courage to share some of your unfinished, nascent ideas with a few people at work, few colleagues, to get their support to make those ideas better. And I really try to encourage people to say yes and in those meetings. That's the watchword there, rather than saying no, that won't work because no. Yes, and if we got the legal involved, we might be able to get that approved. Yes, and to try to really build and be additive in our thinking. So they're cultural changes that we're trying to get. Fundamentally, they work at the individualistic level, but at the tell stage, you bring them back to the collective and we share something. We try to make it a reality.
So when you're doing your workshops, are you leading everybody, either individually or as a group, through those 5 steps? Is that, or are you just educating them in the 5 steps and then they find their own way later?
It depends on every brief is different. So sometimes there are cultural flaws that are more acute than others, and you need to focus on them. So sometimes we really major on curiosity and getting people to be curious again and playing with that. Other times we'll spend a lot of time on tell on how do you create a really impactful way of communicating to people to get them to pay attention and support you, persuasion techniques. So there's an awful lot within the model. But generally speaking, yes, I do want organizations to see the whole thing and to try to get that running itself almost organically. And this is when I'm most happy, is an organization. Mm-hmm. People would say, I'm going to have a tell session, as I sort of describe them in my talks and in the book. I'm going to have a tell session. Who wants to come along? I've been working on this thing. I've got some ideas. I feel a bit silly because I don't know if it's going to work, but I need to tell someone, because if I don't, these ideas will never get good. And suddenly you've got this organic thing happening in organizations where people are stepping up, feeling inspired and interested about the future that they could create for themselves, and having the courage to share that with a few other people.
Yeah, the process clearly means they've got to be prepared to make themselves vulnerable on so many levels.
Yeah.
From a process point of view, once you've started in an organization, how long does your work with them last? Beyond the workshops and then the implementation.
Yeah, as a speaker, one of the downsides actually of being largely introduced as a keynote speaker, as an event speaker, is that sometimes it's just one gig. You turn up, you do the talk, and we've had him. We don't want to hear from him again. We want somebody different next year or whenever the next event is. However, I think my job as a coach is to inspire people enough and give enough tools to those people so that they do want to go. They do want to do it. And very often by doing it, you realize, actually, this is a bit tricky. We need a bit of support here, or we need a bit of guidance here. And obviously that sometimes leads to maybe it's a departmental training workshop, or a remote learning solution, or even one-to-one coaching for the execs that I sometimes get involved with. So it kind of spins off in lots of directions. It doesn't have to, but that's a lovely thing when that happens, because it shows that people are doing it, they're inspired, and they benefit from my help to make it stick.
Do you find different cultures have different affinities for this kind of work, different levels of openness for this kind of work?
Yeah, I mean, the cultures in terms of around the world, when I speak in Asia versus, say, the USA, they're very, very different markets. So I've had to learn about how to speak to those audiences. What I've found is universal, though, is that people are struggling with change. There's so much of it happening. It feels relentless. You just don't know where to place the next bet. And so you're looking to try to break out that cycle, and it's exhausting. So there is a universal acceptance that I need a different technique if I am to keep up and want to be, frankly, in the workplace for as long, for the years to come, because it's a tough place. And one of my favorite stories came from, I put this in the book because I love this story. I spoke at a big event, and in the morning, the bosses were sort of going through a new business strategy. They were describing all the things that were going to change and how things are going to be different. And after lunch, I got the graveyard slot. I got to talk about future ready mindset, ready already, and how you can start creating the future that you deserve. And there's a guy came up to me, and he was 6 months off of retirement. His name was David. I remember this very vividly. And he said, "Thank you. After this morning, I was ready to go to HR and I wanted to bring my retirement forwards. I thought, I can't be doing with this. I can't, I'm too old to change everything and learn a new way of doing things. I really don't have the energy for it. But thinking about it and hearing about the future ready mindset, it made me realize that I can do it and I should do it because I've got a lot of retirement ahead of me, I hope, and I want to have some skills. And what he said to me, he said, when I will retire in 6 months, I won't bring it forwards, but when I leave, I want them to be sad to see me go, not glad that old farts finally left the building. And I thought that was a brilliant mindset. Now, he was close to retirement, but you can get that same lift at any stage in your career if you're prepared to start thinking differently about the future, not seeing change as something that other people do to you or something that you just have to relentlessly keep up with, but something that actually you can create. And I think that's why I do it. I love it.
It's fascinating to hear this, Alistair. I'm really enjoying it. But if the audience want to hear more, where can they find you?
Well, as I mentioned the book a few times, so my book is called Ready Already, and it's just coming out. It's actually out next week at the time of recording. But you can go online as well. If you go to readyalready.me, that's readyalready.me, then you'll be able to find the model there as explained. You'll also be able to get in touch with me if you're interested in finding out more, and you can see where the book is available too.
Alistair, it's been great chatting. Thank you for joining us on the Coaching Conversation. And that's it, everybody, for this edition. See you again next time. Bye. So, there you have it, the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it useful, and I hope it did what it set out to do. As promised at the beginning of the programme, here is a special offer for you, our loyal audience. If you reach out to me at gwiley@sagedream.com and mention this podcast, we'll make available to you a coaching program for you and or your team at a 50% discount. So where can you reach us? So it's definitely gwiley@sagedream.com. You can also reach us at the executive mindset at sagedream.com, and our website is clearly theexecutivemindset.co.uk. If you enjoyed this, do please leave us with a wonderful rating on Google. We'd really appreciate that. So nothing more for me to say now other than see you again soon.